Good evening, everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's enjoying their day, living life, loving life, enjoying life. Wanted to talk to everybody tonight about Admiralty Maritime and how it works and why it's inland. Everybody talks about Admiralty Maritime law being a law of the sea, and we want to figure out why it's affecting us inland. And so we're going to talk about some details on that. And basically the way it works when we're talking about Admiralty Maritime courts. First of all, we all heard the saying that all crimes are commercial. And this is somewhat defined in, I believe it's 27 CFR 72.11. Then we always hear this thing about the, like I said, the Admiralty Maritime is law of the sea, and yet we're talking about all crimes are commercial, and what do they have to do with each other? Well, first let's talk about what is Admiralty. Well, if you look up in your search engine, military ranking, you won't find the term Admiralty under military ranking. Why is that? Well, because it's not a military ranking. It's a naval rank. So now punch into your search engine naval rank, and you'll see where the term Admiralty sits. So what's this mean? This means our military force of arms on the land is different. It is separate from that of the military enforcement on the sea. Well, why is there a difference denoted? And why is it specifically on the land and the sea? Well, let's look at the term merchant or maritime. Maritime has to do with military and commerce. See, it's military enforcement on the land for commerce through Navy. See, the Navy is the force of arms military enforcement of commerce. Period. When it gets to the land, they transfer their jurisdiction of that enforcement to the armed forces on the land. Now, what's that have to do with our courts? Well, again, like I said, all crimes are commercial. You have specific ones that are actually crimes: murder, robbery, rape. But when they define certain things like that as homicide, theft, sexual assault, those are commercial. See, they're different. And so when we talk about, well, what's this got to do with our courts inland? Well, again, like I said, the Admiralty courts is the jurisdiction of commerce. It's the enforcement of commerce, and it has to be able to go from land to land. So when we talk about our nations as states, and we're talking about international commerce as a nation of United States, they have to have that body of government in order to bring that international commerce inland to the inland nations that don't have access to the maritime laws of the sea because they're landlocked. So therefore we have the transfer of jurisdiction to our local police enforcement. This is what tells us they're military. This is what tells us they have to abide by the Liber Code. This is what tells us that their construction is commercial. And even in the commercial realm, the naval enforcement through Admiralty Maritime law still resides over a higher jurisdiction than the land forces because of that issue of commerce, being able to transfer the jurisdiction, the components of the parcels, the packages, the products, the tangible property goods. And this is what tells us that the Admiralty courts deal with property and not land itself. Man still deals with the land issue by creating their own land patents or land patents. And that's an important issue. That's something that can be held private, as well as any other movable product or item can be held privately as well. But once you use a jurisdictional transfer point, then you've transferred it. And it's no longer private. It's being transferred through some kind of public entity. So, when we talk about the inland jurisdictions and commerce and everything, look up the words transportation and traffic, and you'll see that they both mean commerce. So again, when we talk about transferring those goods instead of across bodies of water, and now we're transferring them across particular parcels of land and performing interstate and intrastate commerce, we're using United States Postal System as a transfer of jurisdictions. We're using things like FedEx. We're using those kind of entities, private commercial entities, for the transfer of those jurisdictions. And this is where we see the motor vehicle lease under Title 26 of the United States Code, Section 7701, subsection H. You'll see the motor vehicle lease. And that's for transportation. That's for traffic. That's for commerce. But when we're talking about public, your private right to use the common way as any other common man, then none of that stuff applies to you, period. They can't take that kind of rights away from you by transferring some kind of fictional jurisdiction for some other public purpose. They didn't do that for private purpose. They did it for public purpose, for commerce. And the intent of its use is a priority even under the Uniform Commercial Code. Okay? So now that we've discussed all that stuff, let's talk about the Uniform Commercial Code, which was constructed in its form today in 1952 based on other things through basically substantive, what they construed as substantive common law before that. So in 1952, they actually constructed the Uniform Commercial Code, and one of the first points made in it is under Section 1.103, in where it discusses that the laws are to be uniform throughout the jurisdictions. What's that mean? Well, that means they're to abide by the commercial code enforcements of the Admiralty Maritime Courts, or Admiralty Maritime regulations, or Admiralty Maritime laws, whatever you want to call them. They're supposed to be upheld by that enforcement. That's the uniformity. Once you exceed a certain level that is deemed or determined or discerned, considered to be fair and just throughout, and therefore it's international law, that's the standard that's to be held. You can no longer lower that standard to a municipal code. municipal city ordinance, a county code, a state statute, or a federal statute. None of them have the authority of the Admiralty Maritime because it's enforced through naval Admiralty enforcement. What is naval Admiralty enforcement about? Well, now is when we're going to talk about Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 7, 13, 17, and 18. Write those down, look those up, read them, and understand that the reason that those were instituted, U.S. post offices, a Navy, and of course the commercial courts. That's your jurisdictional transfer ports, and the only way they can transfer some kind of jurisdiction is if they're transferring some kind of actual tangible property. Without that, any intangible property has to have some kind of copyright, trademark, signature, authorized representative, secured party, paramount party in interest, something of that sort, where they have to maintain some kind of legal title which is written down, which is your tangible piece of the intangible property. And this is the difference between their in rem and in personam jurisdictions. So when it comes to the jurisdictions, and this is the big issue, and this is where we're going to talk about the going ahead and accepting their charges by submitting a handwritten plea of guilt. And you have to word this specifically, this handwritten plea of guilt. You have to word it specifically so that there's a notation of the difference between the person as defendant and yourself with your Christian name. See, that's one of the things that they don't do is all parties must be identifiable and identified. So when they name the defendant, they've identified the defendant as a decedent. It is known as a fictional entity. It is a person. And that's what they're talking about in personam jurisdiction. Personal jurisdiction. They have jurisdiction over that person if it's a United States created entity. They have in personam jurisdiction. What they don't have is original jurisdiction. Original jurisdiction belongs with the man. And this is why you clarify it in a handwritten plea of guilt, clarifying the differences, that you are the authorized representative as a paramount party of interest, secured party, holder in due course, American national, and you plead guilty to the facts but not the nature. Simple. But I guarantee you enter something like that, and they're going to refuse it for some kind of technicality. I'm sorry, we can't accept this on a technicality. Bullshit. Once they've accepted it, it's recorded. Period. This is important. This is one of the main reasons why I stress it's so important. Everybody wants to hand in these documents that have a notary signature and stuff. I'm begging with you people to understand the importance of a quorum of witnesses, first-hand witnesses, yourself, your handwritten signature. Again, you can use a signature, it's your mark. You can let the courts know that you use a mark and what that mark is and change it to a symbol, a letter, a number, whatever you want, a series of numbers, so that they know that that is your mark and not your signature. Same. All you got to do is beat these motherfuckers with the right words. But you have to know those right words first. So get away from using all their bullshit and understand who you really are. And that's the importance of the UCC. The UCC, again, like I said, in UCC 1-103, it clarifies that the laws are to be uniform throughout the jurisdictions. Now, it used to say at a different point, it was in there with UCC 1-308, the reservation of rights, and it said that the Uniform Commercial Code was construed to be in harmony with that of the common law. So again, the same thing, just different words. And that's what we're talking about today. You have to start learning how to start using the right words and the right construct. And when you start using things like defendant, you understand and notice the difference. Defendant is not a word. Defendant is a construct of a prefix and a word, making it a term. Terms and conditions of a contract. So again, when we talk about personal jurisdiction and they've named the defendant, they've named a term. What is the term? The term is the fictional entity named within the contract. Period. Plain and simple. And most often, they're doing this under procedures of probate of will. And this is why you have to step up as paramount party of interest, secured party, holder in due course. And you got to be able to understand the UCC itself and be able to back it up with things like UCC 1-304, Section B, Part 1, where it says the authorized representative is not liable. And that's what you are. Look at every check that you've ever written on that signature line. Look at it under a microscope and find out it says authorized representative. They have presumed and clarified on for banking records that you are the authorized representative on that financial instrument, and therefore it carries out for other financial instruments. The same presumption. Unless that signatory line says signatory. Again, understand signatory is a whole different thing. Signatory is responsible party. So again, then we look at UCC 9-402, and it says secured party not obligated on contract of obligor. Who's the obligor? Well, I just showed you in a post a few posts back where I did the accept for value on my court fines that the obligor is listed as the last name first and then first middle name. Either way you look at it, it's the fictional entity is the obligor. And that fictional entity, in one way or another, in this commercial realm, is connected to the United States, and under United States Code, Title 18, Sections both 8 and 9, it clarifies that all United States citizens or obligations of the United States, it clarifies the obligation of the United States are all bonds. Now, the original issue bond for the defendant in the case is the birth certificate. That's the obligation of the United States. In Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 9, it clarifies the vessel. That is the vessel. Under Title 18 of the United States Code 911, it clarifies that there are penalties for professing to present yourself to be a United States citizen. A United States citizen is a civilly dead entity. You cannot possibly be a United States citizen. No one can. Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 911, is a catch-22 for claiming to be a United States citizen. Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 912, clarifies a representative as a public official, I believe. Understand these differences and realize who you are, what capacity you stand in. You're first. Before, even if you file as an SBC and do your UCC1 and DBA and all that, before you're any kind of citizen, before you're any kind of national, before you're any kind of subject, you are a man. on this nation, on this continent, within the bounds of this so-called nation, you are then an American national. Then there is a presumption of some sort of citizenship. Now, that citizenship can be rebutted, again, through Lieber Code, through their classification of civilian. You have military rank and you have civilian rank. Then you have your private rank. Okay? They can classify you as a civilian within their ranking, their military rankings, all they want. You have your military, you have your public civilian, you have your private civilian. I don't care about your private civilian classification. I'm a private man. Period. You are not the surety. And in the case of the United States citizen, the only reason you are the creditor is because you are the original issue item, original issue reality that the fiction was based on. The fiction of credit was based on you. The whole credit and profit and debt system is all fiction. You want to talk about reality, you talk about Genesis 1, chapters 20, verse 26 through 28. God gave man dominion over the land, air, and water. That's law. L-A-W, land, air, and water. That's law. I am law. I have made of the nutrients of the land. I need the air to breathe. I'm 75% water. I am law. I do my best. I have no intent to do any harm to anybody, anything, anywhere, at any time, for any reason, no matter what. My intent is goodwill. My intent is free will. My intent is for everyone to go forth and prosper. I care nothing about profiting. I tell you about profiting. The word Vatican, in its original form, is Vatic anus. They've changed it from those two words, Vatic anus. Vatic literally means prophet, to prophecy. Anus, we all know, means spewing shit. That's where you spew shit from. And so now we know the word Vatican actually in its literal form. Vaticanus means spewing shit. Keep listening to the Vatican. You know, that birth certificate, whoever claims to have that copyright, that's all they have the copyright on, is the form of the birth certificate. And then somebody attaches information on it, fictional information based on an event, the way they interpret it for their purposes, for their use. And you can convey similar information into a family Bible to convey your intent for your use, which is superior. And this is what I urge everybody to do, whether it be in a Bible or just a private document. Private member association. Records are not open to the public. However, if you care to drag my name into the public and slander and libel it, let's have a private meeting. So understand this stuff, and understand also the most important thing I can get across to everybody. Like I try to point out, the family is the start of a nation. The family is the start of a military enforcement. Each individual man is his own military. It's called force of arms. That's what your Second Amendment right is all about. Even as a one-man nation, I have the right to have my own military. I have the right to bear my arms. I have the right to bear my own weapons. And if I choose to use this as my mightiest weapon, you better be fucking prepared. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Bitches, you ain't even in a court of law. You better start using the right fucking words. You want to start talking to me? See, and this is another thing I have. When you want to come on and make your statements and everything, and I make a reply, please. Any kind of comment I make, I'm not taking it out against you. I'm taking it out against the facts in the comment. I want to make sure that what I know is truth. So if you're putting something out or trying to rebut something I'm saying, then you better make sure it's truthful, because I'm going to question everything. That fly on the wall over there, when we get done talking here, I'm going to catch that motherfucker and I'm going to question him. It's what research is all about. You have to do your own research, and that's why it's so important. I hope you people are listening to me. I'm only trying to help simplify it. Admiralty Maritime jurisdiction resides at your doorstep for your use, because you are your own military enforcement under force of arms. And one of the important things to help you realize this, I hope everybody reads the Calvo Doctrine. Calvo Doctrine. C-A-L-V-O Doctrine. And this particular case relates specifically to the importance that somebody coming from a smaller nation and going to a larger nation and conducting their affairs within that nation's jurisdiction does not mean simply because that nation is larger that it has a greater force of arms and therefore that makes the law. It doesn't. Law is a law of equity, fair and impartial. It matters not what the size of the army. But again, when we go into these courts, I urge a quorum of witness on your documents, at least 4. And when you walk into these courts, I wouldn't suggest anything less than 30. And I remind you, George Washington had some cocksucker trespassing on his land. And he gave him fair warning twice. The thrice time, he convened a grand jury on his front lawn and hanged him. This is what we need to start stepping up and enforcing. But we need to start doing it right first. We need to start being able to walk up to these cocksuckers, and when they try to ask you for ID, and I'm telling you to this day, and I don't think I'll ever find one, and you can all look it up and research all you want, you'll never find anything that says I am required any sort of identification. And now let's remember about personal jurisdiction. The defendant or any and all parties in any suit at court in law must be identifiable and identified. So when we talk about private member association, that's the only place you want to be identifiable. Don't carry any other corporate identification, because that corporate has jurisdiction over you in those kind of cases, because they can identify you as the signatory for that defendant. Anyway, if you guys have any questions, review this video. It's got a lot of good information in it. And I stress the importance of using that stuff against them. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Yeah. That's why we're going to get rid of all the ambiguity. We're going to clarify all the different terms and conditions within the contracts, because we're going to start understanding them. You got to. When they present you a documentation and then you a ticket called a traffic ticket, understand the word traffic. It's not a word. It's a term. It's synonymous with commerce. Okay, so now you're signing a commercial citation. Well, what's a citation? Well, they're citing a statute. Well, if it's a commercial citation, then that statute is part of a contract somewhere. Okay, so here's another tidbit of information. When we're talking about state statutes and federal statutes, we're talking about the contract between them and why it's a contract. Look up Federal Acquisitions Regulation. Again, in regards to Naval Admiralty Maritime, it deals specifically with prizes and awards. The collection of prizes against a foreign entity or from a foreign entity. And this is the true and actual importance of the Penhallow Dones case. I just posted that. Look that one up. Read that one. It's in from 1796 or something like that. It's an old case, and it still stands on the books in Congress of Library or in the Congressional Library. Penhallow versus Dones administrators. Read that case and understand why the naval enforcement inland. Prizes awarded. Why the courts have jurisdiction over that stuff. Why it's in personam or in rem jurisdiction and not in personam. So when they say they proved in personam jurisdiction, it's because of the identification. So now they have both in rem and in personam jurisdiction. So even if you question jurisdiction, they're going to assert it unless you assert your information that you know that they have in rem and in personam jurisdiction, but they don't have original jurisdiction. They have not created the parity. They have not created the connection that you are the tangible signatory, because it's presumed that you're the authorized representative. And in a contract under, again, UCC 3-402, Section B, Part 1, it clarifies authorized representative not liable. Under UCC 9-402, secured party not obligated under contract of debtor. The debtor is known as a United States citizen or a state citizen. Either way, it is known as a fiction. All of those corporate fictions are known and can be identified through a CAGE code, a commercial and government entity code. Known as a citizen, a corporate entity, somehow connected to the United States. And therefore, under 18 U.S.C. subsection 8, an obligation of the United States. Period. Plain and simple. It all ties together. And again, like I said, Article 1 of the Constitution, Section 8, Clauses 7, 13, 17, and 18. And you'll see why we have post offices, why we have a Navy, and why we have transportation codes that are run through commercial courts. Anyway, think about this stuff, read it, comprehend it, and like I said, I just posted a lot of recent stuff. Look back through all the stuff I've posted in the last several months and really start to comprehend this stuff and how it all ties together. Title 26, Section 7701, subsection H, the motor vehicle lease is very important in all of this because it's part of every traffic code of all states. This is their taxation purposes for commerce and for transportation and traffic citations. This is why they assert their military enforcement on the land through police forces bearing forces of arms, violating the 1st, 2nd, 9th, and 10th Amendments, along with the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th, and 8th. They're violating every last one of the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights. Every last one of them. Every time they even pull you over. Every time they stop you on the sidewalk, they are violating every last one of them without cause. And again, this is the importance of handwritten plea of guilt in blue ink, clarifying the difference, naming yourself as a party in correct grammar with your Christian calling, in proper capacity as an American national or known as American national, born as a man. See, when they ask me for ID, I'm sorry, but I don't have any identification. Well, what's your name? I'm sorry, but I don't have a name. Well, how do you know if somebody wants you? Well, they call me Keith. Oh, well, what's your last name? I told you I don't have a name, but I hail from the family Little. Well, where do you live? Well, I live everywhere I go. Well, where do you sleep at night? Well, wherever anybody lets me. Oh, so you're homeless? No, God gave me the earth as my home. What's your birth date? Sorry, I don't have a birth date. But I hear I was born on August 20th, 1966. See, in every last bit of what I've spoken,